Happy Columbus Day, America. Oh, for Pete's sake. Did I just infuriate about half of the country when I said that? Okay, well, I hope not. Hey, everybody, thank you very much for joining me here on In the Booth. This is Central City Radio, and I am America's greatest journalist, Jim Bunner. Okay, yes, so today is Columbus Day, and from what I understand, some people out there, just like they do every year, they're complaining about the fact that we're celebrating Columbus Day, or most of us anyway are celebrating Columbus Day. All right. Okay, so just a little technical difficulties there. I think we got it taken care of, however. Okay, anyway, it's Columbus Day. Today is the day in which Americans, and as far as I know, people all over the Western Hemisphere, celebrate the voyage of Christopher Columbus back in 1492, just after Spain had gotten done defeating the Muslim empire that had dominated the Iberian Peninsula. Well, Spain and Portugal both did, I suppose. Okay, anyway, that's plenty of history. The Iberians just took the Iberian Peninsula back, and all of a sudden, Ferdinand and Isabella wanted to expand. They wanted to find a new trade route, and Christopher Columbus sailed to the Americas, and he landed somewhere in the East Indies. All right. And this led to the creation of the United States. This led directly to the colonization of new groups of people coming to the Americas. It led to the creation not only of the United States, but also Canada, Cuba, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, all of the countries, all the way from Canada to Argentina. Every country in the Western Hemisphere owes its existence to the voyage of Christopher Columbus. Okay, so it would make sense for people in the United States to honor Christopher Columbus and celebrate his legacy. Okay, celebrate everything that that this voyage has done for all of our countries, all of the existence of all of our countries. Okay, but here recently, some people have, I guess they found a problem with this. I don't know what the problem actually is, but I don't know. They see Columbus Day now as, I guess we're supposed to look upon Columbus Day now as some sort of a celebration of genocide and slavery and all the rest of this. Okay, and there have been cities and states, as you know, that are no longer celebrating Columbus Day. They don't like it. This is bad. Well, most recently, Washington, D.C., okay, just joined a list of other cities and states that have decided that Columbus Day is just something not to be celebrated. Okay, this is from ABC News. First story of the day. Somebody no longer wants to celebrate Columbus Day. Washington has joined the list of cities and states to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day in place of Columbus Day, after the D.C. Council passed emergency legislation on Tuesday to rename the federal holiday. Now, you know that if they're calling this emergency legislation, this has got to be big. I mean, it's an emergency that we are no longer celebrating Columbus Day, and we're instead replacing it with this Indigenous Peoples Day thing. Okay, council member David Grosso proposed the Indigenous Peoples Day Emergency Declaration of 2019. No, seriously, that's the name of this declaration. Their official rule saying, okay, we're not celebrating Columbus Day anymore. The Indigenous Peoples Day Emergency Declaration Act of 2019. And this is in an effort to, quote unquote, honor Indigenous people and their rich history and cultural contributions. And of course, DC's Mayor Muriel Bowser signed the legislation, went into effect immediately for the holiday today. Okay, blah, 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 etc., etc. At least 8 states And 130 cities have legally changed the holiday, including Wisconsin, where Governor Tony Evers signed an executive order last week. Other states are attempting to find a middle ground. Earlier this year, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt signed legislation recognizing the day as both Native Americans Day and Columbus Day. Some have replaced Columbus Day with other titles related to the Native American community. Summit County, Ohio selected First Peoples Day, and Hawaii switched to Discoverers Day. All right, and what else have we got here? Now, this is interesting. Okay, now all of these people, I presume, are trying to replace Columbus Day with this Indigenous Peoples Day or whatever else they're trying to do here. I imagine so that they no longer offend. They probably believe that they're not offending Indians with this, although I think that they're probably just not offending. I don't know. What should I say about these people? Overly sensitive individuals? Is that about the best thing that I care to say on the radio about them? Okay. Anyway, they have offended people with this day, this Indigenous Peoples Day. The National Italian American Foundation, a nonprofit organization that promotes Italian American culture, published a statement opposing this legislation that came out of Washington, D.C., the emergency declaration against Columbus Day. Okay, they published a statement opposing the legislation, corroborating what some of the constituents have told them. The statement said, "We believe to repeal Columbus Day as a federal holiday, which is celebrated by over 20 million Italian Americans, only to replace it by another holiday celebrated by another ethnic group, would be culturally insensitive." Okay, so under the guise of tolerance, at least that's what these people who are now enacting this Indigenous Peoples Day are saying. Under the guise of tolerance, they're actually offending an ethnic group. Okay, look, this is just silly. Okay, I don't know where you get a celebration of genocide out of Columbus Day. Okay, this is something that Americans have been celebrating since what, the 1930s? Okay, and it makes sense. Okay, Christopher Columbus sailed. His voyage made it possible for countries like the United States to exist. Okay, this is something that we as Americans owe to Christopher Columbus. All right, we should celebrate the fact that our country exists. We should celebrate the fact that we are here now because of this Italian explorer. Okay, Christopher Columbus. And, well, apparently, this is what I keep on hearing from the Indigenous Peoples Day celebrators. Well, Christopher Columbus was this bad genocidal maniac, and he brought colonization to the poor Indians and all these bad things. Well, okay, so instead what the Indigenous Peoples Day celebrants, is that a word? Celebrators, maybe. Makes it a little easier to say. What they say is we need to recognize the culture of the Indians. Okay. I don't know. Can you still call them Indians? Is that so not politically correct that you can't say it on the radio? I think you still can, as far as I know. Anyway, well, what they say is we should celebrate the culture of the Indians or the Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. Well, see, that interested me over the weekend. I thought that I might sit down and do a little bit of studying about Indian cultures. And I found a lot of fascinating things about this. Did you know that for hundreds of years, tribes all the way up in Alaska had been trading slaves as far south as California? And as a matter of fact, tribes in the Pacific Northwest had been practicing slavery for hundreds of years. Yes, they've been practicing this far longer than the United States had been practicing it. The Sioux and the Winnebago are not really the quote-unquote natives of the Great Plains. Apparently, they came down out of central Canada in the 1500s, and I guess they had conquered or subjugated whoever the Indian group was that was already living in the Great Plains before they showed up. Cannibalism had been practiced by some Indian groups for a very long time. The Arawaks and the Caribs, I guess, had invaded the Caribbean and conquered whoever the Indians were that were living there before. And of course, as everybody knows, anybody who studies the prehistory of Mexico or the pre-Columbian history of Mexico understands that the Aztecs never actually called themselves Aztecs. Aztec was actually a derogatory term that had been given to these people who called themselves the Mexicas, or originally they called themselves the Tenochs, and had been given to them by groups of people in southern Mexico. Well, why was this term given to the Aztecs? It's because these people in southern Mexico didn't happen to like the Aztecs. The Aztecs came in from someplace else called Aztlan, and they conquered these groups of people in southern Mexico. They enslaved them. They cannibalized them. They used them for human sacrifice, which is why these people were so anxious to help the Spanish conquer the Aztecs. Okay, so that's a little bit of information about the cultures of the Americas. Yes, believe it or not, these people are every bit as guilty of committing atrocious acts as the Indigenous Peoples Day celebrators want to accuse Christopher Columbus and Western civilization in general, I presume, of doing. Okay, guess what? Indigenous people are every bit as human as all the rest of us. They have had their bad moments. They have done things as well. Okay, to say that you shouldn't celebrate Columbus Day because somehow it's a celebration of colonization and alleged genocide, and somehow or other Indigenous Peoples Day cannot possibly be a celebration of genocide or slavery or conquest or taking land. Well, as a matter of fact, I forgot to mention, okay, there is anthropological evidence to show that there were actually Polynesian people living in the Americas before any of the quote-unquote Native Americans ever crossed the Bering Strait. No, really, look it up sometime. Look up Kennewick Man. Very interesting stuff. Or look up the Fuegians down in Tierra del Fuego. Okay, anyway, yes, every single one of these things that the Indigenous Peoples Day celebrators want to accuse Christopher Columbus of doing, you know, Indian groups, Indian cultures from Canada to Argentina are every bit as guilty of doing all of this stuff. How celebrating Christopher Columbus is somehow wrong, but celebrating Indigenous peoples is not wrong is something that I will not understand. Okay? Now, I should think that if Columbus Day is a day that we celebrate a voyage that made it possible for the United States to be in existence, that should be something that all of us as Americans should celebrate. Okay? It's not just something that, I don't know what these Indigenous people celebrators would say about it, that it's, I don't know, do they believe that it's a white people holiday? Is that why they believe that this is somehow, I don't know, a celebration of colonization and genocide? Is that the way they see it? Okay, I just thought this was an American holiday. As a matter of fact, I would think that this could be not only a holiday for Americans in the United States, but a holiday for people all over the Western Hemisphere. Okay, but these people who want to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day because they just don't happen to like Christopher Columbus, they see this differently. But anyway, personally, I don't have a problem with Columbus Day. I actually have a bigger problem with Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay? Columbus Day, the way I see this, is something that all Americans can and should celebrate. I mean, if you happen to like living in this country, okay? Now, speaking about what America has accomplished, as I said before, Indian tribes had been practicing things like slavery for hundreds of years, while the United States really had only been practicing it for, what, 260-ish years? And see, the United States passed a 13th Amendment outlawing slavery. Okay, so none of these Indian tribes from Alaska to the Pacific Northwest to California to wherever are still practicing slavery. It's been outlawed because the United States came here, and of course, Christopher Columbus made it possible for the United States to exist. Okay, well, that's my spiel for the beginning of In the Booth, and we'll have just a little bit more where I left off in just a little bit.